Gravity is a law you learn to respect when you spend 40 years hanging off the I-beams of a skyscraper with nothing but a safety harness and your own balance between you and the pavement. I am Henry Vance, 76 years old, a retired steel worker with hands like callous leather and a spine that remembers every rivet I ever drove. I know about balance. I know about leverage. And I know that when I fell down the stairs of the house I built with my own two hands, it wasn't because I slipped. It was 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. Rain hammered against the windows, a relentless drumbeat that matched the pounding in my chest. I was standing at the top of the oak staircase, gripping the banister. Below me in the foyer stood my son-in-law, Brad. Brad was a man who wore expensive suits he couldn't afford and drove a leased BMW he couldn't maintain. He was a failed real estate developer with a smile that was too bright and eyes that were always darting, looking for an exit or an angle. For 2 years, he and my daughter Sarah had lived under my roof. They claimed it was to help me after my hip surgery. I knew better. They were here because Brad had leveraged their own house into foreclosure on a bad deal in the Heights. "You heard me," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. "I heard you on the phone, Brad. $200,000? Brad looked up at me. His face was pale, slick with sweat. He loosened his tie. "You misunderstood, Henry," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. "It's a bridge loan for the new development. Standard business doesn't involve promises of a life insurance payout coming soon," I countered. "I am not deaf, Brad." Sarah stepped out of the kitchen. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her eyes rimmed with red. She was a ghost of the vibrant girl I had raised, worn down by years of Brad's schemes and her own desperate desire for a lifestyle she couldn't afford. "Dad, please," she whispered, looking at the floor. I looked at her, heartbreak warring with anger. "He's betting on my death, Sarah. He's promising my money to criminals before I'm even in the ground." She didn't answer. She didn't look at me. She just stood there, wringing her hands, her silence a betrayal louder than any scream. "I'm changing the will tomorrow. I'm calling my lawyer at 8 a.m. You won't see a dime, Brad." Brad's expression shifted. The panic in his eyes vanished, replaced by a sudden, terrifying emptiness. It wasn't rage, it was calculation. He looked at the stairs behind me. He looked at the distance to the marble floor below. He looked at Sarah. Sarah saw the look, she saw the intent, and she did nothing. She turned her head away. Brad started up the stairs. I asked, gripping the rail tighter. He didn't answer. He walked up the steps, slow and deliberate. He stopped on the landing, right in front of me. He smelled of scotch and expensive cologne. "You're confused, Henry," he whispered. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "It's late. You're tired." He put 2 hands on my chest. "Brad, don't," I warned. He shoved. It wasn't a tentative push. It was a violent, full-body thrust. I flew backward. My hand was ripped from the banister. For a split second, I was weightless, suspended in the air like I was back on the steel beams, 80 stories up. Then, impact. My shoulder hit the edge of a step. Crack. My hip slammed into the wood. The world spun in a kaleidoscope of pain and motion. I tumbled, head over heels, a rag doll in a flannel shirt. I landed in a heap at the bottom of the foyer. My head struck the marble floor with a sickening thud. Darkness exploded behind my eyes. White-hot pain seared through my left arm. I tried to breathe, but the air had been knocked out of me. I tasted copper, blood. It was trickling from my scalp, pooling under my ear. Brad's voice, high-pitched, fake. "Oh my God, Sarah! He fell! He just—" I heard footsteps pounding down the stairs. Brad knelt beside me. I opened my eyes, fighting the black spots that danced in my vision. Brad's face hovered over mine. He wasn't looking at my injuries. He was looking at my chest, watching to see if it was still rising. His eyes were wide, dilated with adrenaline. He looked terrified, but beneath the fear, there was hope. He thought it was over. He thought he had won. But he forgot who I was. He forgot that I was forged in steel. I coughed. Blood sprayed onto the white marble. Brad flinched back. "He's alive," he whispered, sounding almost disappointed. I gritted my teeth against the agony. I reached out with my good hand, my right hand, the one that had held a riveting hammer for decades, and gripped the bottom post of the banister. "Sarah!" screamed from the top of the stairs. She was crying now, hysterical tears that were too little, too late. I pulled. My muscles screamed. My shattered arm throbbed with a pulse of pure fire. But I pulled. I dragged my broken body up. I got one knee under me, then the other. Brad said, reaching for me. "Don't touch me," I growled. I used the banister as a crutch. I pushed myself up. I swayed, the room spinning like a top, but I locked my knees. I stood. I stood on broken legs in pure spite. Blood dripped from my forehead, staining my shirt. I looked like a revenant, a corpse that refused to stay down. I looked Brad in the eye. He froze. He took a step back, stumbling over his own feet. He looked like he had seen a ghost. "Do it again," I rasped. My voice was a low rumble, gravel grinding against steel. Brad stammered. "Do it again," I repeated, louder this time. "Finish it. Throw me down again. Because if you don't kill me right now, Brad, if you let me walk out of here alive—" Brad stared at me, paralyzed by the sheer force of my will. He looked at his hands, then at me. He was a coward. He could push an old man, but he couldn't face a fighter. "Call the ambulance," I said to Sarah, not taking my eyes off him. "Tell them I slipped. Tell them I'm clumsy." Sarah dialed, sobbing. "He fell. My dad fell down the stairs." I leaned against the post, waiting. I watched the relief wash over Brad's face. He thought my silence was weakness. He thought the concussion had scrambled my brain, that I wouldn't remember the shove, or that I was too afraid to speak the truth. He was wrong. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is loading the gun. If you are listening to this and you think blood protects you from wolves, check your locks. Family is just a word. Survival is a choice. I wish someone had warned me that the hands you held as children are the same hands that will push you into the grave to pay a debt. The ambulance ride was a blur of lights and sirens. I spent 3 days in the hospital. My left arm was broken in 2 places. I had a concussion and 3 cracked ribs. I played the part perfectly. When the doctors asked what happened, I looked confused. "I don't remember," I mumbled. "I was at the top of the stairs." Brad and Sarah visited every day. They brought flowers. They held my hand. They acted the role of the concerned caregivers for the nurses and the doctors. "We're just so worried," Brad told Dr. Evans. "He's been unsteady lately. Maybe it's time we discuss long-term care options." He slid the document onto my tray table on the second day.
"It's just a precaution, Henry," he said, smiling his shark smile. I looked at the paper. It gave him control over everything, my accounts, my house, my life. I picked up the pen with my left hand, my broken hand, casted and clumsy. "I'll sign," I said weakly. I signed my name, Henry Thomas Vance. Except I didn't. I signed Henry Thomas Vance. I left out the H in Thomas. A trick my old union lawyer taught me 40 years ago. A signature with a deliberate error made under duress is contestable. It's a breadcrumb for a forensic handwriting analyst. Brad snatched the paper away before the ink was dry. He didn't check the spelling. He just saw the victory. "Rest now, Dad," he said. He left to plan my funeral. I stayed to plan my resurrection. As soon as they were gone, I reached for the hospital phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Ty," I whispered. Frank's voice was gruff, familiar. Frank was an old union buddy, a guy who used to clear picket lines with a baseball bat. Now he ran a high-end private security firm. "I heard you took a tumble." "I didn't tumble, Frank." Silence on the line. "They're at the hospital now," I said. "The house is empty. I need you to get in. I need eyes, Frank. Everywhere. Living room, kitchen, hallway." "I can be there in 20 minutes, Frank said. "This is an emergency," I said. "I need proof." "Consider it done," Frank said. I hung up. I lay back against the pillows, the pain in my arm a dull throb. 2 days later, I was discharged. I returned home in a wheelchair, broken but breathing. Brad met me at the door. He had moved my things. "Welcome home, Dad," he said, gesturing to the small guest room off the kitchen. "We moved your bedroom down here to the ground floor, for safety." "Safety," I repeated. He meant prison. He meant he wanted me where he could watch me, where I couldn't interfere, where I would slowly wither away until the insurance payout cleared. I wheeled myself into the room. It was small, cramped. But as I looked up, I saw it. A tiny, almost invisible glint in the smoke detector above the bed. The red light blinked once. Frank had been here. The camera was recording. I settled into the bed, pulling the blanket up to my chin. I looked at Brad standing in the doorway, smug and victorious. "Thank you, Brad," I said softly. He smiled. He closed the door. I closed my eyes. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the animal to step into it.
They say that a cage is only as strong as its lock, but sometimes the prisoner holds the key in his pocket and is just waiting for the right moment to turn it. For 3 weeks, I have lived in the small guest room off the kitchen, confined to a wheelchair I no longer need. My bones have knitted together with the stubborn resilience of old iron. My arm is out of the cast, hidden under the sleeve of my flannel shirt. My legs, which they think are withered and useless, are strong enough to carry me up a skyscraper. But I don't walk. I sit. I drool a little when they feed me. I let my head loll to the side. I have become a master of the performance. I let Brad feed me oatmeal that tastes like paste, watching the disgust ripple across his face as he wipes my chin with a rough napkin. I let Sarah bathe me, sitting in the shower chair, feeling her tears hit my back as she scrubs me with a sponge. She cries not for me, but for herself. She cries because the guilt is a living thing inside her, eating her alive from the gut out, but she is too weak to cut it out. Brad has grown bold. He thinks I am a vegetable. He thinks the fall scrambled my brain so thoroughly that I am nothing more than a breathing piece of furniture. He talks openly on the phone in front of me, pacing the small room, his voice loud and arrogant. "Yeah, the old man is on his last legs," he told a man with a neck tattoo who visited yesterday. They stood right in front of my wheelchair, discussing me like I was a condemned building. Insurance pays out double for accidental death in the home. It's just a matter of time. He's weak. The man with the tattoo laughed. "Make sure it looks like an accident, Brad." "Don't worry," Brad sneered, kicking the wheel of my chair. "He's got the balance of a drunk toddler." I recorded it. Every word, every threat, every casual discussion of my murder. The camera in the smoke detector, installed by my old union buddy Frank, caught it all. The microphone taped under the mattress caught Sarah asking, late at night, "What if he wakes up, Brad?" And it caught Brad's reply, cold and devoid of humanity. "Then we push him harder next time." But the final straw, the moment that turned my patience into a weapon, came yesterday morning. I was sitting by the window, staring at the overgrown garden, when I saw the blueprints on the kitchen table. Brad had left them there, careless in his victory. I wheeled myself over when he was in the bathroom. Vance Demolition. Site, 442 Oak Lane. Objective,
full site clearance for multi-unit condo development. He wasn't just selling my house. He wasn't just selling the home I built with my own hands, where I raised my daughter, where my wife took her last breath. He had taken a deposit from a developer to bulldoze it. He was going to erase my legacy, turn my life's work into a parking lot for overpriced apartments. I wheeled back to the window, my hands trembling with a rage so pure it felt like holy fire. "Not today," I whispered to the glass. Brad decided to throw a party. He called it a retirement party for himself, funded by the credit cards he had opened in my name. He invited his friends, his shady business partners, the loan sharks he was trying to impress, and a few of my old neighbors to keep up the appearance of a loving family. "It's a celebration of life, Henry," he told me this morning, buttoning a shirt that cost more than my first car. "We're celebrating your transition. We're moving you to the state facility tomorrow morning for your own good." "Professionals," I mumbled, letting a line of drool escape my lip. "Exactly," he said, wiping it away with his thumb, pressing hard enough to bruise. "You'll be happy there." The night of the party arrived. The house was loud. Bass thumped through the floorboards, vibrating in my teeth. The smell of expensive catering and cheap perfume filled the air. Strangers wandered through my living room, drinking my scotch, putting their feet on my furniture. Brad wheeled me out at 9 p.m. He parked me in the corner, draping a heavy wool blanket over my lap to hide my legs. "Say hello to everyone, Dad," he said loudly, patting my head like a dog. My neighbors looked at me with pity. "Poor Henry," Mrs. Gable whispered. I sat there, silent, watching. I watched Sarah hiding in the kitchen, drinking wine straight from the bottle, unable to look at me. I watched the loan shark laughing with Brad by the fireplace I had built stone by stone, selecting each rock from the riverbed myself. Brad clinked a spoon against his glass. "Ah!" he shouted. The music died down. The room turned to face him. He stood on the hearth, looking like the lord of the manor. "I want to propose a toast," Brad said, raising his glass. "To family, to new beginnings." He looked at me. His eyes were cold, dead things. "To Henry," he said, mocking me, "who built this house." He took a sip. Then he leaned in, lowering his voice so only those close could hear, but projecting enough for me. "Say goodbye to the house, Henry," he sneered. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had shoved me down the stairs. I looked at the man who planned to bulldoze my life. "You're right," I said. My voice wasn't a mumble. It wasn't a rasp. It was clear. It was strong. It was the voice of a foreman shouting over the roar of a blast furnace. The room went quiet. Brad frowned. I gripped the blanket. I threw it off. It landed in a heap on the floor. I put my hands on the armrests of the wheelchair. I pushed. I stood up. I didn't wobble. I didn't sway. I stood to my full height, 6 feet and 2 inches of iron worker muscle that hadn't atrophied nearly as much as they thought. The guests gasped. A glass shattered on the floor. "I won't be seeing it again," I continued, taking a step toward him. My gait was steady. Brad dropped his glass. It bounced on the rug, spilling scotch everywhere. His mouth hung open. You can walk?" he stammered. "I can do a lot of things," I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small remote control. I pointed it at the 80-inch television mounted above the fireplace, the one Brad had bought with my money. "Let's watch a movie," I said. I pressed the button. The screen flickered. Video date, October 14th. The footage played in high definition.
It was the view from the smoke detector at the top of the stairs. It showed me standing by the banister. It showed Brad walking up the steps. The audio boomed through the surround sound speakers, crystal clear. "You're confused, Henry." The shove. The guests screamed as they watched my body fly backward. They watched me hit the steps. They heard the sickening crunch of bone against wood. Then the aftermath. They watched me drag myself up from the pool of blood. They watched me stand on broken legs. And they heard my voice, growling like a wounded bear. "Do it again. Finish it." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Brad's face had drained of all color. He looked like a wax figure melting in the heat. He looked at the guests, at the neighbors staring at him with horror. He looked at the loan shark, who was slowly backing away toward the door. That's, Brad screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the TV. "He faked it. It's a deep fake." I asked calmly. I pressed the button again. Audio played.
"We owe 200 grand, Sarah."
What if we just
Sarah's voice.
do it?
Brad's voice. Sarah ran out of the kitchen. She fell to her knees in the middle of the living room, sobbing hysterically.
Hurt.
She wailed.
He made me. I didn't want to.
I looked down at my daughter, the girl I had carried on my shoulders, the girl I had protected from the world. "He didn't make you watch me fall," I said, my voice cold as the winter wind. "You stood there, Sarah. You watched him push me." I looked at the front door. The door opened. Frank stepped in. He wasn't alone. 4 uniformed police officers walked in behind him, their hands on their belts. "Bradford Miller," the lead officer barked. Brad looked at the cops. He looked at the back door. He bolted. He shoved a guest aside, knocking over a table of appetizers, and scrambled for the kitchen. But I was there. I moved faster than a man my age should move. I stepped into his path. I blocked the way. He skidded to a halt. He looked up at me. He saw the old steel worker. He saw the man who had walked beams 80 stories in the air without a safety net. He saw the man who had built this house with sweat and blood.
He screamed, desperation making him brave.
He raised a fist. I caught his wrist. My grip was like a vice. I squeezed. I felt the bones in his wrist grind together. He cried out, dropping to his knees. I leaned down, bringing my face inches from his.
"Do it again."
He crumbled. The fight left him. He slumped against the wall, weeping like a child. The police swarmed him. They hauled him up, cuffing his hands behind his back. "Sarah Miller," the officer said, turning to my daughter. Sarah screamed my name as they cuffed her.
"Dad, Daddy, help me!"
I watched them drag her out. I watched the flashing lights reflect off the walls of the house I had built for her. "Goodbye, Sarah," I whispered. The guests fled. They didn't say goodbye. They ran out the door like the house was on fire. The room emptied. The music was gone. The food sat untouched. Frank walked over to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm standing, Frank."
I'll lock up.
Frank said. I walked to the stairs. I stood at the bottom, looking up at the landing where I had almost died. I remembered the pain. I remembered the betrayal. I put my hand on the banister. I climbed. 1 step, 2 steps. My legs were strong. My spine was unbroken. I didn't falter. I reached the top. I walked to my bedroom, the master bedroom they had tried to kick me out of. I opened the door. I went to the cabinet and poured a glass of whiskey. I walked to the window and looked out at the night. The police cars were driving away, taking the rot with them. I was alone. My daughter was gone. My son-in-law was gone. My family was a crater. But I looked around the room. The walls were solid. The roof was sound. My house was still standing, and so was I.